Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this session, I'll be continuing with the topic thalamus. So those who haven't seen the session on thalamus, the first session on thalamus, please do watch and come so that you will get a continuity. So in this session, I'll be talking about the grey matter and white matter of the thalamus. When we talk about the thalamus white matter, there is nothing much to say. Because the thalamus as such is a group of grey matter. So the white matter, we know on the lateral surface of the thalamus we have the external medullary lamina. Then on the superior surface you have the stratum zonale, and within the thalamus there is a Y-shaped internal medullary lamina. So only these three are considered as the white matter of thalamus. The external medullary lamina on the lateral surface, on the superior surface you have the stratum zonale, and within the thalamus there is a Y-shaped lamina that is known as internal medullary lamina. Now coming to the grey matter, we know the two thalami are connected by a group of grey matter that is known as interthalamic connexus. Now the entire thalamic nuclei are divided into three groups: anterior group, medial group and lateral group. Which is the structure dividing the thalamic nuclei into three groups: the anterior group, medial group and lateral group. It is the internal medullary lamina. So we have already mentioned that the internal medullary lamina is in the form of a Y. It has got two limbs anteriorly and a stem posteriorly. So between the two limbs of internal medullary lamina, you have the anterior group of nuclei. Now the group of nuclei lying medial to the internal stem of the internal medullary lamina, you call it as a medial group, and the group of nuclei which are lying lateral to the internal medullary lamina, you call it as the lateral group. So these are the three important groups of thalamic nuclei which you should be knowing. So anteriorly, the anterior group is known as anterior group nuclei, which are lying between the two limbs of internal medullary lamina. Coming to the medial aspect, this medial group is further divided into a large mass which is lying dorsally and a very small mass which is lying ventrally. So the medial group is further divided into medial dorsal and medial ventral. Large one which is lying dorsally and a very small one which is lying ventrally. Now coming to the lateral aspect. Lateral aspect is again divided into the part which is lying dorsally and the part which is lying ventrally, because this is an ovoid mass, isn't it? The ovoid thalamus, when you look from above you can see the dorsal aspect, and when you look from below you can see the ventral aspect. So the lateral group is further divided into, just like the medial group, the lateral group is further divided into a mass which is lying dorsally and a mass which is lying ventrally. But the difference between the lateral and medial group is that the medial group, there is no further subdivisions for the dorsal and ventral group, but for the lateral group, the dorsal group is called as the dorsal tire and the ventral group is known as the ventral tire. So the dorsal tire and ventral tire is further subdivided. That is the difference between the medial group and lateral group. Now let's see what are the components of dorsal tire of the lateral group. So from here we can see that LD stands for lateral dorsal, LP stands for lateral posterior, and the last one is known as pulvinar. So 1, 2, 3, lateral dorsal, lateral posterior and pulvinar. These are the three group of nuclei which lies in the dorsal tire. And below the dorsal tire we have the ventral tire. So let's see what are the components of the ventral tire. So anteriorly you have the ventral anterior. Then VL and VI are actually synonyms. Ventral lateral or ventral intermediate, and the posterior one is known as ventral posterior, which has got two components: ventral posteromedial and ventral posterolateral. So all together, starting from here to here, ventral anterior, ventral lateral or ventral intermediate, these are actually synonyms, and the ventral posterior, which is made up of ventral posteromedial and ventral posterolateral nuclei. All together you call it as the ventral tire. So anterior group, medial group and lateral group. These are the most important group of thalamic nuclei. Apart from that, you will get some other nuclei as well, which are the extra nuclei which you will be getting other than the main nuclei. One is known as midline nucleus, or you can also call it as paraventricular nucleus. you know the medial surface of thalamus is actually facing the third ventricle, isn't it? So between the two thalami and the ependymal lining, you can see some scattered nuclei that is known as midline or paraventricular nucleus. The next group is seen within the internal medullary lamina. Within the internal medullary lamina, you can see many grey matter scattered along. And one of them is large enough, and that is known as centromedian nucleus. Okay, so within the internal medullary lamina, you can get many nuclei, intramedian nuclei scattered within the internal medullary lamina, and among them you can get the largest one, which you call it as centromedian nucleus. Now coming to the last group, that is the reticular nuclei. Reticular nuclei you get outside the external medullary lamina. So on the lateral aspect of the thalamus, you can get a curved group of nuclei, that is the reticular nuclei, but it is separated from the lateral surface of thalamus by the white matter that is known as the external medullary lamina. Now these are the three other non-specific nuclei, and we can also mention the medial geniculate body and lateral geniculate body along with in this group, though they are considered under metathalamus. Why? Because functionally it is related to thalamus. So in the other nuclear group, we include the medial geniculate body as well as the lateral geniculate body. So these are the different types of nuclei, the main group being the anterior, medial and lateral, and apart from that you can get the midline or paraventricular within the internal medullary lamina, the largest being the centromedian. Then outside the external medullary lamina, that is the reticular nuclei, and you have the medial and lateral geniculate bodies. And you know the thalamus is considered as the largest gateway for the sensory information. Whichever sensory information is coming from the body parts, it is passing through this gateway before they reach finally into the sensory cortex. So in the next session, we will be seeing what are the connections which the thalamus makes with the other structures of the brain and the spinal cord, and we will see some of the important clinical aspects as well. So do keep watching, and please let me know